5 men drove to a basketball game. They never came home. One of them was found dead in an abandoned mountain cabin months later, in circumstances that made no sense at all. The other 4 were never found. Not a trace, not a bone, not a single piece of clothing. This is the Yuba County 5, and the deeper you go into this case, the less any of it makes sense. It's November 24th, 1978. Yuba County, California. 5 young men are getting ready for a big night. They have tickets to a college basketball game. UC Davis versus CSU Sacramento. It's not the NBA. It's not a championship. But for these 5, it's a huge deal. Let me introduce them to you, because these are not just names. These are people. Gary Mathias is 25 years old. He's the most outgoing of the group, the one who makes friends easily, the one who keeps the energy up. He has a history of mental illness and had been institutionalized previously, but by November of 1978, he was doing well, taking his medication, holding a job. His family described him as stable and happy. Jack Madruga is 30 years old. He owns the car they're driving, a 1969 Mercury Montego. Jack is reliable, responsible. He's the one who organized the trip. Jackie Hewitt is 24. Quiet, easygoing, liked by everyone who knew him. Ted Weiher is 32, the oldest of the group, big, gentle, soft-spoken. And Bill Sterling, 29 years old, the 5th member of the group. Here is what all 5 of these men have in common. They all have mild to moderate intellectual disabilities. They are all part of a supported living program in Yuba County. They live with varying levels of independence. They hold jobs. They socialize. They go to basketball games. They are not incapable of functioning in the world, but they are vulnerable in ways that matter for this story. Their families drop them off. The 5 men pile into Jack's Mercury Montego and drive towards Sacramento for the game. They arrive. They watch the game. Their team loses. And sometime after the game ends, they get back in the car. They are never seen again by anyone who knows them. Now here is where the story immediately stops making sense. Their route home from Sacramento to Marysville, the nearest large town to Yuba County, is simple. South to north on Interstate 5, or Highway 99. Flat, direct, well-lit. They had driven similar routes before. Instead, somehow, the Mercury Montego ends up on a mountain road, not a little off course, 65 miles off course, in the Sierra Nevada mountains, on a narrow forest road called Doris Road, near a tiny settlement called Forbestown. The car is found 2 days later, on November 26, stuck in the snow on the side of this mountain road. The engine is fine. The car is not damaged. There is no mechanical reason for the car to be stopped. The keys are in the ignition, but there is no sign of the 5 men. Search and rescue teams are deployed. It is winter in the Sierra Nevada. Temperatures at night are dropping below freezing. The terrain is steep, heavily forested, remote. These are 5 men, at least some of whom have limited ability to navigate in the wilderness. Search teams comb the area for days. They find nothing. The search is eventually suspended. The case goes cold. The families wait. Now I need to tell you something that investigators discover when they look more carefully at the car and the area around it. There are footprints in the snow, multiple sets of footprints, leading away from the car in different directions. Some of the footprints lead up the mountain. Some lead along the road. Some disappear into the tree line. Here is the detail that nobody has ever been able to explain. The footprints stop, not at a road, not at a clearing, not at any logical destination. They simply stop, mid-trail, in the snow, as if the people making them cease to exist. Search teams follow every set of footprints they can find. Every single trail leads to the same result. It ends in the middle of nowhere, and there is nothing beyond it. The case sits cold for nearly 3 months. And then in February of 1979, a group of snowmobilers makes a discovery. About 19 miles from where the car was found, deep in the mountains, there's an old Forest Service trailer, a maintenance cabin, Used by workers during the warmer months, locked and empty in winter, the snowmobilers notice something. The door is open. They look inside. On one of the cots, they find the body of Ted Weiher. Ted Weiher is dead. He has been dead for some time. The cold temperatures of the mountain winter preserve his body enough for investigators to determine some basic facts. Ted did not die from violence. Ted did not die from exposure immediately. Ted survived in that cabin for approximately 13 weeks after the 5 men disappeared. 13 weeks. He was found with a beard growth consistent with that time period. He had lost an enormous amount of weight. He had eaten some of the food stored in the cabin, military-issue food rations, enough to survive but not enough to thrive. He eventually died of exposure and starvation, alone in that cabin, in the middle of winter. And here is what makes this even harder to process. There was a propane heater in the cabin. Ted did not use it. There were matches. He did not light the heater. He lay in the cabin for 13 weeks, starving and freezing, with a working heat source right in front of him. He was found wearing only socks and a light shirt. Even his pants had been removed. In the freezing cold of a Sierra Nevada winter. Why didn't he use the heater? Why didn't he put on more clothes? Why didn't he try to walk to safety? The cabin was remote, but not unreachable. Snowmobilers found it easily enough. Ted Weiher was not incapable. He was not completely without survival instinct. He had lived alone. He had held a job. But he lay down in that cabin, and he did not get up. What happened in those 13 weeks, alone in the dark and cold? We don't know. We will never know. Now the search intensifies. If Ted Weiher was in this cabin, maybe the others were nearby. Investigators and search teams go over the surrounding area with everything they have. They find the remains of 3 of the other men within a mile or 2 of the cabin. Jackie Hewitt, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling. Their remains are scattered, partially consumed by animals, exposed to months of mountain winter. Cause of death cannot be determined for any of them. They were out there in the mountains while Ted lay die in the cabin. Why didn't they stay together? Why were their remains spread over such a wide area? Did they separate by choice? Were they trying to find help? Were they confused, lost, frightened? There are no answers. And then there is the 5th man, Gary Mathias. Gary Mathias is not found. Not then, not later, not ever. Gary Mathias has never been found. Let's pause here and deal with a question that anyone who hears this case immediately asks. How did they get there? 65 miles off course on a mountain road in the middle of winter at night. The official theory is that they got lost. That after a basketball game, possibly upset about losing, possibly confused, they took a wrong turn, then another wrong turn, and gradually, incrementally, ended up in the mountains without realizing how far off course they had gotten. There are problems with this. Jack Madruga had driven to Sacramento many times. He knew the basic route. Getting 65 miles off course in the wrong direction is not a simple wrong turn. It is a sustained, significant deviation from everything familiar. But let's say they got lost. Let's say it happened somehow. Why did they leave the car? The car was working. The car had gas. It was cold, but the car could run and the heater could run. If you are 5 men with limited ability to navigate in the wilderness, and you're lost on a mountain road in November, the single safest thing you can do is stay with the car. Stay warm. Wait for someone to find you. They left the car. All 5 of them, on foot, into the mountains, in the dark, in November. This is a decision that investigators and researchers and the families of these men have been trying to understand for more than 40 years. Why did they leave the car? There's a witness. A woman who lives in a small settlement called Challenge, near the mountain road where the car was found, reports seeing the Mercury Montego earlier that evening. She says the car stopped near a small market. She says she saw the 5 men outside the car. She also says she saw another vehicle, a pickup truck. The pickup truck was near the Mercury for a period of time, and then the Mercury went up the mountain road. The pickup truck followed. This witness statement was noted by investigators and then essentially set aside. It was never fully pursued. The pickup truck was never identified. But think about what it means if the witness is accurate. Someone was following these 5 men into the mountains. Someone in a pickup truck watched them turn onto a dead-end mountain road and then followed them there. Who? Why? We don't know. The truck was never found. The driver was never identified. Let's go back to Gary Mathias, because Gary Mathias is the piece of this case that doesn't fit any clean explanation. Gary was the most capable of the 5. He was the one with the most social skills, the most energy, the most practical ability to function in a crisis. If anyone in that group was capable of surviving and finding help, it was Gary. Gary's body has never been found. The terrain where the others were found was searched extensively. Mountain rescue teams went over in spring after the snow melted. Dogs were used. Aerial surveys were done. No Gary Mathias. His family refused to accept that he was dead. His mother spent years believing he was alive somewhere, perhaps in a mental health facility, perhaps suffering from an episode that caused him to lose his memory. Some researchers have pointed to Gary's history of mental illness and theorized that something triggered a severe episode that night, that he panicked, that he led the group off the road, that his behavior was erratic in ways the others couldn't manage. But this doesn't explain the car being found on a remote mountain road. It doesn't explain the pickup truck. It doesn't explain why Ted didn't use the heater. It doesn't explain where Gary Mathias is. The Yuba County 5 case has attracted serious research attention over the decades. The author David Paulides, who investigates mysterious disappearances in national parks and wilderness areas, has written about this case as part of a larger pattern of inexplicable disappearances in the American wilderness. His observation: the Yuba County 5 are not unique. There are dozens of cases with similar characteristics. Groups or individuals found dead or missing in wilderness areas under circumstances that don't align with straightforward explanations. Footprints that end. Bodies found in locations that search teams had already covered. Survivors who behaved in ways that made no survival sense. Paulides stops short of providing an explanation. He documents a pattern and leaves the question open. The question stays open. Here is what we know for certain about the Yuba County 5. 5 men drove to a basketball game on November 24, 1978. Their car was found 65 miles off their route on a mountain road 2 days later. One of them survived for 13 weeks in a mountain cabin before dying of exposure, having never used the available heat source. 3 others were found dead in the surrounding wilderness. One was never found. No criminal charges were ever filed. No suspects were ever identified. The pickup truck was never traced. The official conclusion is accidental death by exposure, following an unexplained deviation from their route. The families never fully accepted this. How do you accept an explanation that doesn't actually explain anything? Jack Madruga's mother visited the site where her son's remains were found. She said she could not understand how her son, who knew those roads, ended up there. Gary Mathias's mother waited for years for her son to come home. He never did. The 5 men of Yuba County were not famous. They were not powerful. They were ordinary people living ordinary lives in a small California county. And one November night, they drove away to watch a basketball game, and the world swallowed them whole. There are still people alive today who knew these men, who drove to that mountain road and stood in the snow and tried to understand what they were looking at. They still don't understand. Neither do I. Neither will you. If this case kept you up tonight, you're not alone. Subscribe. Hit the bell. Next week, we go somewhere just as dark. And that wraps up today's story. If it gave you chills or just kept you hooked, drop a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow. Let me know your thoughts on this case in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.